I spend way too much time on the internet. I mean, I look at my phone like way too much. I get sucked into the vortex of social media posts and videos and comments. The digital trap has all the right bait for me. It knows how to lure me in and keep me there. Social media consumption is honestly one of the worst parts of my life. It's also one of the best parts, and I have a hard time reconciling that dichotomy. I mean, for real, it reels me in. It wastes my time. It steals my attention away from my loved ones. It distracts me. It a little too often tempts me into making unnecessary impulse purchases. It makes me angry, and it far too often makes me lose a little bit of faith in humanity. But it also connects me with a worldwide, like global faith community, you all. It allows me to stay connected to exponentially more people than I'd be able to stay connected to without it. It inspires me. It is Social media has helped me build successful businesses and other projects that have helped a whole lot of people. Could it be that both things are true at the same time? Social media is both good and evil. Today's guest is a TikTok pastor. And at one point, she makes the argument that social media might be a shortcut to deeper spiritual connections. I'll let the conversation tell the rest of the story. Hey, I'm really glad you're here. I'm really glad you're listening. Hey there, Betweeners. I'm so glad to be with you all today on another episode of the Between Podcast. This is your host, Matt Matson, and I got a pretty cool guest today that I'd like to introduce you all to. Reverend Bethany Peerbolte is known by literally hundreds of thousands of people, maybe millions of people on social media, especially TikTok, as RevBethany. RevBethany is a loving, affirming, celebrating representative of Christianity who lifts up everyone she encounters through her content, especially folks who have been pushed to the margins by organized religion in the past. Rev Bethany finds these, I think, like wonderfully creative ways to bring scripture to life and to connect the message of the gospel to the headlines of the week. She's a fearless voice on TikTok, on Instagram, and on YouTube, where she loves not only sharing her empowering messages, but also hearing the stories of so many folks out there in the world and helping those people maintain their relationship with God, despite how maybe the church might have treated them in the past. Bethany also runs a ministry called Our Tapestry, which is a progressive digital community that serves folks in the theological deserts of society. Our Tapestry helps people actively declutter their faith. It works for justice, and it's a diverse and welcoming community of encouragement. Bethany, welcome. Hey, let's start here. Tell us about your real life. Give us a snapshot into the daily rhythms of Rev Bethany. I mean, just sitting on TikTok all day scrolling? Or are you just recording social media videos all day long? What's your life
Yeah.
like?
Well, first of all, thank you for that intro. I think I'm gonna just have to like play that on my bad days, be like, yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
great. Thank you so much.
yeah,
Yeah, I do kind of joke that I get paid to scroll. Like I think every church leader should be scrolling at least an hour of their day that's like on the clock because that's
yeah.
where people are. Um,
Wow.
so I scroll, I record, I plan Bible studies, I do one-on-one pastoral care. When I moved to Denver to start this, I thought I would be making content constantly, but there's so many other things about this ministry that have kind of uh, attached to my heart
Yeah.
that I really spend a lot more time doing what I was doing in a traditional church, which is reaching out to people and doing devotionals and planning worships and the content is really just my lifeline to people. Like that's how they find us, and hopefully can be drawn in closer to what we're creating online.
That was quite a thing to start with, that you think every pastor, every clergy member should be spending a day or an hour a day scrolling social media. Man, I'll bet that ruffles some feathers here and there. But that's real. Like that's where people are. Those are real people. Those are
I
real people out there.
Every church is going to say like we want younger people, we want young
Hmm.
families, we want whether I believe that that's what every church should want or not. If
Yeah.
that's what you want, guess what? You got to get to where they are. You got to speak their language. You got to know their culture, what jokes they're making, who's in their news, because those are the ways that you're going to, put a sermon illustration together that actually they go, oh, wow, this, we used to, I mean, in somebody they would say, you have to have the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other.
Yeah.
Well, our newspaper is our phones and our social media now.
Yeah.
So, you can read the newspaper, but not anybody under 30 is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so fascinating actually. And also, I think there's still this feeling amongst maybe older generation clergy members, pastors that I talk to that, well, yeah, that's, social media is, college students, it's kids, it's no, it's not. Like, no, it's not. I mean, Facebook is people 50 plus at this point, and Instagram, I think, in my experience, has become most of the people I'm connected to are over 40 years old, are like that's where people are. People in the prime years, midlife life of their life. The people who have families or potential donors to churches, if you want to think that way, like gosh, that's where they are. I love that call out right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think each social media does have its own kind of demographic of who is where. So you can target very specific generational populations based on
Yeah.
what social media you're on.
So, I mean, uh, between is about sacred moments of human connection. But I mean, church in general, faith institutions in general, I think value such a large value that religious institutions bring to the table and have for centuries is a sense of deep relationship, a sense of pastoral care, a sense of being familial, right? Like
Yeah.
really, really tight connections. So let's talk about TikTok. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about 15-second videos, most of that, like silly little 15-second dance videos. Can that lead to meaningful engagement around faith issues?
Unbelievably, it does. I wish I was smart enough to see. I didn't see it. I was just making videos for my youth group.
Yeah.
And then I started seeing community happen.
Mhm.
I say like the 15-second video is kind of like the new parable.
Mhm.
It gives people enough information to kind of like get them on the road of the topic you want to talk about, but not enough that you tell them what it means. So then they have to go to the comment section and like talk and yell at each other and be like, what's this? What's that? Oh, I see that. I see that perspective. And so it gives them enough to get them there,
Yeah.
and then they have to figure out what the rest is all about. So I love those short little like let me poke a couple button videos. TikTok does go longer. I mean, I think
Yeah.
TikTok can go up to 10 minutes now. So like I do some like comments back to people where it'll be a little bit longer, but I mean, the king of TikTok is those shorter videos that are just like making fun of something or following a joke or like calling out a reality. And those things really get people talking. When you hit a nerve, they're like, yeah, let's talk about that. I can't believe I'm not the only one. Or, you know, why does that happen?
Yeah. There's also something I think interesting about just faith in playful spaces, right? I mean, I think
Yeah.
so many people have sectioned those parts of their life off for so much of their life, no matter their theology, no matter their denominational affiliation, right? But faith is quiet with candles and
Right.
songs. And fun is things we do in every other place, right?
Right.
But
And maybe sinful, like passionately
right.
sinful, like, oh no, don't have fun.
Yeah. And social media, I think, because of its association with, well, it's legitimate association with a bunch of trash, honestly. Like
Oh,
there's a
for
lot of
sure.
things that are just rough out there, right? Like so it's really easy to just simply conflate social media equals bad, social media equals sin maybe, or equals evil, or
Yeah.
equals all the things that are ruining our society. But what I love is that I mean, you've got good evidence, and we can get into it here of this is working. I mean, people are not just finding you and clicking like, there's real engagement happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say the first kind of hint that people were engaging on a deeper level was I would go live and I would see the same people kind of
Mm.
coming into the chats. And I was like, oh, like, they'd ask for prayer. They come back next week and say, mom's doing better. Those kinds of things, those conversations that you have Sunday morning when people are walking into the building, we were having in
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's interesting. I would say a lot of, I read the Bible seriously, but not literally, which is a
Mhm.
Marcus Borg book.
Mhm.
And people were coming in saying like, hey, I bought the book. Hey, I bought the book. And I was like, well, why aren't we doing a Bible study or like a book study on
Yeah.
this? Like what? So we met and did a book study. I had 80 people sign up and I was like, I'm going to have to do 2 of these because I wanted, like on Zoom, you can only see so many people. And I was like, I want to see everyone's face at the same time.
Yeah.
So we had to limit this a little bit. Um, one night on the live, someone came in and I had seen their screen name a couple of times. But they said, hey, had a really rough day. I think this is the last one. This is the last day. And my pastor heart was like
Mm.
broken because I don't know where this person is in the world. I don't know what resources around them. I don't know their family structure. I don't know what to tell them. People in the comments were obviously feeling the same way. They're like, where are you? Well, what's going on? People like, I live 4 hours away, but let's meet for coffee, tomorrow.
Wow.
Like this, people really cared about this random stranger on the internet. So all night I was awake, like trying to figure out what I was supposed to do as like, I don't know how to do this as a digital pastor. What was I supposed to do for this person? And the next morning, I looked at their TikTok page and they had posted a new video and I was relieved. And so I went into the comments and said, I'm so proud of you. You made it through the night. There were other people from that live who did the same thing.
Wow.
Went to their account the next day, said, I'm so proud of you. So glad you're here. That person had like, they were making like little art things to try and fund their life. And they said their store was like sold out. So
Wow.
I was like, oh my gosh, these are random strangers on the internet caring for a random stranger on the internet. That is the most profound community. Like you can love someone who their story, but to love someone you have no idea
Yeah.
what you can give them or if they can give you anything or if there's any continuing relationship and to still go out of your way and care for that person. I was like, oh shoot, something is happening and I have got to be a part of it.
Yeah. Wow. That is, there's also something about, I mean, you naming, sort of these are random people on the internet helping, caring for, actively showing up in the lives of other random people on the internet. These people aren't, they're not, they don't have the clarity of these people are on my team. And do you know what I mean? Like they go to my church, they live in my town, they look like me, they talk like me, they eat at the same restaurants as me. There's none of that. There is quite literally, there is just the belief that there's a human behind the social media handle. There's a human there. And wow, that is beautiful and pure.
Yeah, it was very, very cool. And that was kind of the moment where I was like, okay, I've got these people meeting for book studies. I've got this thing going on. Like, I don't know what the direction is. I don't know what this is going to form, but if I can keep listening to what people need, I just have to trust that, it can be, I can make something there for them, that we can create a community that does something that's unusual.
Yeah.
And really, the most unusual part of it is that we don't live anywhere close to each other. Like
Yeah.
we are in different zip codes and we have never seen each other in person. I've met a couple of them. I've traveled around and met a couple people in
Yeah.
person, but we've never had a big gathering. We're hoping to have one this summer.
Yeah.
And they're texting each other. They're in the Discord asking, how did this thing go and how'd that test go? Um, and a lot of them are never going to walk into a church building again. Some of them will not say the word I am Christian because of the pain that they've been through and the things that they've seen in the world. But this is a community that they are, and I'm forward with them. Like I'm obviously coming from a Christian perspective. I'm going to run this group from a Christian perspective, and they're very comfortable with that. And a lot of them don't have any other options.
Yeah.
I tried to set people up. I love the traditional church. It's why I wanted to do this, because I wanted people to fall in love and have the support that I had in my life. And I tried to connect people with in-person, like on-site churches. And there were so many places, which I call theological deserts, where
Mhm.
there's one brand of Christianity, not necessarily one denomination, but it's a more conservative, it's an older congregation, it's one kind of church.
Yeah.
Or they've got the other option is like the big mega church with the evangelical like feel, and like either one of those might not be what they want.
Yeah.
And so then they're left with nothing. And so really if we spend all of our resources on on-site churches, we are literally abandoning siblings in spaces where that is not a possibility for them.
Ooh, that's another big comment that I'm clearly uh, a fan of in the work that we're doing with Between is, I mean, I really believe that, Bethany. I think if the only way we invest in the future of sort of the modern or the future of faith in America is by rehabbing or building more local buildings where we hope people will come on Sunday morning and hope the building gets used every once in a while over the course of that feels like a really dumb way to do faith. And I think I say that it's not inherently a bad thing. It's a wonderful thing for
It's worked
the
really well.
yeah, it's fantastic. Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
And there are so many people. I would even argue me. I've found a good local church, but I feel like I was lucky. Like I feel like I stumbled into it. I feel like I did what a lot of people do, which is search churches that don't hate gay people in my area. And there were like two or three that popped up, and I was like, well, I'll try those. And
Yeah.
if I hadn't had a good experience at that one or two that are easily accessible from my house, I probably wouldn't even have a local church, right?
And you had enough grace and healing
Yeah,
to walk in to a
yeah,
building that identified itself as a church. Um, those spaces have been physically unsafe for a lot of the people that
yes,
I serve. And I know a lot of people are like, well, what do you mean physically? Like, I mean physically. The stories that I hear are horrendous.
yes,
And I think even the most conservative churches out there, some of the stories I would hear, they'd be like, they're doing what? And like the way that that line of, hate gay people, or, love the sin or hate the sin, that
yeah,
the way it's being played out is a lot more dangerous than what a lot of people realize. And
mm,
so hearing these stories, collecting these stories, telling other church leaders these stories, is definitely a part of my ministry, to be like, this is what's happening. This is the reality. People are, being flogged or being told to flog themselves in order to fix themselves.
mm,
People are being sent off to camps that have some really harsh punishments for saying the truth about yourself, so
yeah,
that you learn to not say the truth about yourself. And so, you know, I think most Christians, when they hear those stories, go, oh, that's not what I meant. But the reality is that is who we're getting lumped into with.
yeah,
So if we can be bold enough and loud enough to say, hey, it's not all of us, hey, what's going on, and really claim what we believe,
mm,
we can do a lot of work. I think that's a lot of the people that catch on to me. A lot of them are like, oh, a female pastor. I'm like, we've been doing this for decades.
yeah,
Why is this still a surprise to people?
yeah,
I say, transgender lives matter. And they're like, well, you can say that in your, I'm like, yeah, my denomination has made statements about that. Like, we
yeah,
formed committees to study this, like, it's just such a shock to people that this is something that churches are doing. That you don't really have to say anything wild. You just have to say what you are and who you are and what you're doing. And people respond. I mean, the gospel is the gospel and is powerful in and of itself. So make sure you're telling people what that is to you, what your sort of interpretation of what Jesus has done. Say it.
yeah. Just say it. I hear you talking about the stories that you hear from so many people who probably found you on TikTok or found you on social media one way or
Yeah.
another. And they found you, probably a lot of those folks found you because you showed up not loudly or obnoxiously or angrily, or uh, you just showed up and said, transgender lives matter and they're celebrated and loved fully without reservation or without condition by me and my faith. And by
By
just
God.
saying that, right? Like you just said a really simple statement with a
Right.
period on the end, not even an exclamation point, right? And hundreds of thousands of people will like that post, right? Like what is this is are you hearing so much trauma that people are carrying around with them? Maybe either direct trauma that they experienced by religious institutions or secondhand trauma that they're carrying around because of their fear of religious institutions, because they know what they've done to other people who share the same identity or who share the same life story or who share the same lived experience as them. Tell me about that trauma that I think you are hearing about.
Yeah, I think it's both ways. It's people who have experienced it firsthand. They've been a part of a church, they've been active, they were loved by people. And then as they grew into themselves and were honest about themselves, those people said, well, but we can't love you with that.
Yeah.
Like, that's got to change. And that is heartbreaking for someone to come in and be like, oh, we don't like brunettes. You need to get out of here.
Yeah.
Like, just you change something about yourself or the way people see you, and the love is gone. And then it means that all the love you had, you question. You're like, did
Yeah.
they ever really love me? Like, they didn't really love me, actually. They just loved that I was willing to look like them and act like them and show up, and participate and, be a butt in the seat and be some money in the coffers. And so that is the major trauma. People just kind of get sick of that. They're just like, I'm done holding that space for these people,
Yeah.
and I'm out. There is the secondhand stuff of parents who are out and the kids who kind of know that Christianity is in their history.
Yeah.
And then they have to rectify, like, what does that mean that my family, were Christian? It's almost to the point of like, what does it mean that I have a Nazi relative? Like, how
Yeah.
do I, like, it's really getting to that point
Yeah.
that this group has hurt so many people that I love. How do I hold that identity? Can I hold that identity?
Yeah.
The thing I think is the most shocking to me is how many of these people have been through horrendous things and still desperately want a relationship with God. There is something in them that says that's not what God is.
Yeah.
God is different. Like, there is a spirit in them saying, please don't give up on me. Please don't judge me because of my people. There are other options out there. And I almost feel bad sometimes because I'm like, if this was a boyfriend that had done this to you, I'd be like, get out. Don't
Mm.
ever look back. So that, like, it's God that has hurt this, like, that we are representatives of God. God has hurt these people.
Yeah.
And they're willing to give God another chance. They want something in their lives that is spiritual. And I'm always just like, really? Okay. Like,
Yeah.
as a pastor, super glad that that's happening. But like, that's all spirit work happening. And I'll just be there for those, who
Yeah.
are still hanging on.
But that's a big, man, for those of us who receive people who have been hurt by religious institutions in the past, to receive those people and recognize that uh, they've been hurt by image bearers of God, to use that phrase.
Yep.
And they're coming back and we are the receivers. We're today, I've got to be God and I've got to show up in a whole new way. That's a massive responsibility. And that's scary almost. I think as I say it back that way, that is a scary responsibility because of because let me say this. I believe that my theology, my Matt Matson's way of understanding God and the big questions of life is rooted in uncertainty and curiosity, is rooted in celebrating the magnificence of every human being I come into contact with unconditionally. And that's super hard to do. And there's stuff I don't know. There's blind spots. I've got blind spots that come from my background, come from the way I was raised, come from my own religious experiences in the past, right? I, how do I know if I'm carrying around toxic theology, right? I think that's the heart of the question. Or how do I know if the people that I'm hanging out with are carrying around toxic theology and I'm just forgiving it because they're fun to hang out with and I kind of like their songs. You know what I mean? Like how
Right.
do we assess that?
So I think the key word there is know. Uh, if you know anything, you should probably break that apart a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that's where the church has gone off track, is on this pursuit to know
Mm.
what God is like, to know what the afterlife is, to know what scripture says. Um, those kinds of things just lock us in to an idea, and do not let the Spirit lead us in any sort of direction. We're just there. Um, I would say my key is, if you're denying that somebody exists, or that they don't know themselves as well as, you think you know them better than they do, that's probably not the way you want to
Mm.
go. You want to ask questions. Curiosity is wonderful. Asking questions is always a great thing. I would say, the toxic theologies, the really abusive ones, are the ones that deny someone's either ability to understand the image of God that they hold, who they are, what is their identity, um, or denies it completely, because it literally leads to death.
Mm.
These people are being told, you are not supposed to be in this world.
Oof.
Um, they're being told you need to change, and then they pray and 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 pray, and they're not changing.
Yeah.
And instead of going, I wonder why all these people who are praying to be straight, God hasn't helped any of them. Like, I do not believe ex-gay is an existent thing. That's probably a whole nother podcast. But
Mm.
all these people have prayed. None of them have been changed. None of them have lost the desire, the attraction. Some of them choose not to move on it, but none of them have lost that. God has not answered a single one of their prayers.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, well, I still know that this is, the way it's supposed to be, let's ask why.
Yeah.
Why is God, what is there in this person's identity, in this diversity, in this expansion, that God is saying, no, I'm going to see how this plays out.
Yeah.
And that's, we're looking for the fruits of the Spirit. I can look at somebody who is open and out and see love and joy and self-control and all those things. And I can look at someone who's in a conversion camp and see hate and self-harm and death.
Yeah.
At the very least, if that's my only thing to decide where God is, what side God is on, I have to go with where the fruits of the Spirit are actually showing up.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to ask, I want to maybe clarify for our listeners something that I know, but it might have got lost in the introduction. But RevBethany on TikTok and on social media is kind of an outward message, and you've built community there. But then there's this other tighter knit, maybe I don't mean to compare. There's this other thing that is inherently tight knit, and that is Our Tapestry, which
Mhm.
is separate from, but clearly connected to the work that you're doing on social media, right? Can you maybe draw the line between those two, and then tell us a little bit more about Our Tapestry, how it works, who's there? Just help us
Yeah.
understand those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, social media, you have the followers. They're going to like videos. They're going to comment. They might come to lives. They might be patrons and give money, monthly.
Yeah.
That's a common thing. The people who are in Our Tapestry are people who are saying, I really want to engage with this. I
Mm.
really want this to be, and I want to be an active part of creating this community, and I want to be actively supported by this community. So we have Tuesday night Bible studies. We have 2 different sessions, so East Coast and West Coast people can find a spot. We actually have people from Trinidad and Tobago and other
Cool.
places around the
Yeah.
world that join us, and they're getting up at 3 a.m. to
Yeah.
come to Bible study. So, like, wow. So we do Bible study. I have a calendar to make appointments so people can do one-on-one or have like family counseling appointments. Let's go through those passages and see what, God is saying. We have a Discord, which is like a chat kind of room that we can do devotional posts in there. We can talk further about the Bible studies. We can reach out to one another, see how everyone's doing. A lot of it is on Zoom, Bible studies, pastoral care is on Zoom. And I'm sure I'm forgetting things, but it is essentially trying to create the church that you would walk into, but in a
Yeah.
digital space. Um, so we do worship services. Our last one was for the Transgender Day of Remembrance, and we had a 24-hour prayer vigil beforehand. So I compiled a bunch of prayers and had people submit prayers, sent them out to the people who were praying for an hour for the 24 hours before. And everyone took their hour and prayed. And then we met together for a worship service and, talked about, how we can walk into the next day
Hmm.
really intentionally for Transgender Day of Remembrance. So it was, those kinds of moments, those celebrating those kinds of things are things the church doesn't always do. And so that's always our first priority. There's Christmas, there's Easter, there's options out
Sure.
there.
Yeah.
But some of these other ones is where we'll eventually get to those kind of spaces, and we do special things around the holidays. But really celebrating those moments, those milestones, those days in our lives that we can say this can be a spiritual thing too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you're going to celebrate Pride, you're going to go out and you're going to do Pride. Let's figure out, how do we create liturgy around that?
Yeah.
How do we say, like, what's the prayer you say in the morning before you go to the parade? What prayers are you saying? What things are you saying to people when you're at the parade? Make sure you're telling people that God loves them and to
Yeah.
shine your, like, let's create liturgy around the life you're already going to live and make it more spiritual.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a tangent, but I'll go on it. I think one of the devaluing pieces for digital ministry is that we really value the physical.
Hmm.
We want to give a hug, we want to touch a shoulder, we want, all those kinds of things have been a huge part of the church community and that kind of thing. And so what I think we've gotten distracted by with the physical is the spiritual of we are spiritual beings.
Mm.
So you don't have to hug someone or be in the same room with someone to experience the divine. And so being forced to be in these digital spaces, to not have that physical, we go spiritual and vulnerable and deep so quickly
Yeah.
because we don't have to go over the, like, okay, what am I wearing? What do I look like? I have people that come that will turn off their cameras.
Yeah.
They're in a depressed mode. They haven't gotten out of bed in 3 days, but they can come to Bible study because they can turn off their camera. They don't have to worry about, being judged for those physical, visual kind of things. And then we can just focus on the spirit. What does your spirit need?
That's a cool tangent to go on, actually. Mm, that is that's a new thought for me. I'm processing it right now. The idea of how can we think of technology as a pathway, a shortcut to spiritual connection. And I'll bet by you framing it that way, there are listeners who are like, "Oh no, yes, I'm experiencing that. I experienced that through podcasts that I listen to, or I experienced that through people I'm connected to on social media, or I experienced that through Zoom connections that I have with people around the world." And there's a missing part to those relationships, and it is the physical part. It's the I want to give a hug and I want to be in proximity, and but there's something else. There's a reason we keep coming back to it. There's a reason we keep evolving our technological connections and maybe it's because there is at least some level of access to our spiritual selves through technology. That's a really I'm going to sit with that
Yeah.
this week. That's a
you know
uh
the, the anonymity is a blessing and a curse, right?
yeah,
So, like, there's definitely going to be people out there who are going, yeah, but you never know if those are real people or if they're saying what they want.
yeah.
You don't know that in person either. Like,
Mm,
people are
yeah, yeah,
at faking that. So the anonymity is definitely a blessing and a curse. The curse is you get the trolls, you get the people who, want to just play their games and, think that their opinion should just be spouted everywhere. But you also get people who would never ask a physical in-person question. I
yeah,
had youth in my youth group that had been through years in confirmation with me and weren't really questioners. And they're asking me questions on TikTok, like, really good. Like, why does the church have a bad relationship with sexuality? It's like,
yeah,
oh, that's a great question. But it's because they're safe at home behind their screen. They can log off that they throw it out there and then they're like, well, if it hits, it hits. If it doesn't, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, but I asked the question. So yeah, it's you're gonna get one side, you're gonna get the other. And as we're talking about social media in these like danger, what are the dangers, which there are, let's not forget that there are major benefits as well.
Yeah. This just has me really just thinking about what is this, the a simple but huge question, which is what is the future of religious institutions, of faith institutions? What does it look like? And I I just often think about my church experience or the church experiences I've had and how church is designed for church people, for people who like the things that church delivers. It's designed specifically for those folks. And because we don't live in the 1950s, so many families don't feel an obligation anymore to sort of civic institutions like churches or like community organizations or whatever. And so there's less obligation to go or less obligation to show up in those spaces. And so, uh, because of that, people who church isn't designed for just don't show up because it doesn't offer any value or it doesn't offer and what I really mean is simple things like small groups are not designed for introverts. Like that's not, they're just not. I mean, I know we can make them friendly, but they're just not. They're designed for people who like to talk and who get energy from that. And you want me to go to church and add another hour or two of my life to go to somebody's house a stranger's house for dinner and have a conversation? No, right? Like that. I think there's a lot of
The
people
other
who
one I
feel that.
think is wild is that most churches are like have a 10, 11 o'clock service.
Yeah.
When do young children take their nap?
Yeah. No kidding.
What are we doing?
Yeah, there's a reason the 2-year-old screaming in the back. It's because it's nap time. That's exactly
Right.
right. Yeah.
Yes.
Well said. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I do this because I love the church. I love hymns. I
Yeah.
love organ music. Like I really love that. And I know and I hope that those things will exist in 100 and 200 years. But the church, when we had people who felt that obligation to go, they needed, it was where you networked for work. It's where you met your friends. It was everything. The church forgot what it
Yes.
is. Why do people come to church? And so we're like, well, why aren't you coming? Why aren't you coming to worship? Why aren't you? Well, they're going on a hike on Sunday and they're having a bigger connection with God
Yeah.
than when they walk into the building. So we have to rediscover the why. What
Yes.
what does bring us out to church? What does the church provide that a meetup group, a book reading group, like these other groups that are not or that are secular? What can we provide that they can't?
Yep.
And I'm actually starting a book to talk about how digital ministry has really shaken up the church to redefine or at least define finally
Yeah.
what we actually are, what we actually mean. Why would someone give money to us and not the nonprofit down the street that has a great
Yeah.
track record? Like, why? Because you can't just accept that it's going to happen anymore. We're not answering the questions that people are asking today. We're still answering the questions that people had in the 50s.
Yeah.
So there is, I mean, I think there's a huge reformation coming of
Yeah.
the church having to really wrestle with our reputation in the world, why people would want to engage with us, what is our role, and how do we better be that role
Yeah.
in our world.
Yeah. One of my biggest frustrations with any churches that I work with, and this is true of really any organization that I work with, and I've done consulting and sort of business strategy work with lots of organizations, including faith-based organizations. And often we get stuck on question number one, which is what is the one very specific thing you're about? What is your core marketing narrative is a nice business term I will often use with a group and they'll say, what? And I'll say, well, what is the one thing you're about? And Jesus can't be the answer. Like Jesus for what? So that what? What are you aiming for? And so many churches that I work with and that I know have, literally 40 different mission organizations that they're serving in 24 different causes because I don't know, whoever was in charge 30 years ago thought this would be a good one to add to the pile. And then another one 10 years after that, another one 5 years after that. And that's just the mission work of the church, not to mention what happens, how we staff, how we make decisions. And so let me ask you this question. What is your work? You've got a blessing that maybe a lot of faith institutions don't have, in that you get to run your show. You run your social media channel. You get to lead Our Tapestry, and you do that in a beautifully humble way. It's not about you. It's about the people that you're caring for. I watch that and I see it consistently. And so I want to hear your answer to the question. Well, like, what's the one thing? What are you about? RevBethany, Our Tapestry, all the things that you do. What are you about?
Yeah, our one thing is to reach people in theological deserts who don't have access to a progressive, loving community, a pastor who can help them. That's the goal.
Yeah.
So, we are hopefully having it in person. That's not my main thing. I'm throwing that off to the people who said let's do it, and like, great, I'll show up. But
Yeah.
the main thing that I am doing, because there are so many people out there who are carrying around trash in their faith,
Mhm.
and it's making them feel like they're just going to leave the whole bucket behind. And I'm like, no, we can declutter this. We can help you. We can make sure that this is still something that can be a part of your life. That's the person.
Yes.
That one person is what all of my energy goes towards. How do I get to them?
I love that. I really love that answer, because it's not about you. It's not about what you're doing or what you're delivering or what you're thinking. Your answer to that question is all the people out there who haven't yet heard that there's a place that they can still find God. And they can't find it in their local community. They'd have to drive hundreds of miles, or they'd have to, book a flight someplace. And you show up because those people are sitting at home right now, wondering, longing for, wishing for, begging for, just desperately wishing, praying for something like this to be in their lives. I love that answer. I know a big part of that is the heart that you have for LGBTQIA folks. Why why has that heart grown for you? What's the origin story of what led you to become a loving voice for that community?
Yeah. So I grew up Missouri Synod Lutheran. So the narrative was always us versus them.
Hmm.
And the queer community ended up being one of one of the thems.
Yep.
And I lived in a pretty economically diverse area, but other diversities, not really.
Yeah.
So when I went to college, I started meeting people who were out and were happy and joyful. And I was like, this is not who I was
Hmm.
told you guys are.
Yeah.
And having to like justify or like rectify, like, what, who was wrong, or what's happening here? What am I not seeing? That, what is the devil keeping from me? And I got to the conclusion with those fruits of the spirit was like, look, I don't know what's right, what's wrong. I don't get it, but the fruits of the spirits are happening there. Um, and once I got to know them more and went to pride events, there's just like, there's no way God can't be here.
Yeah.
This is so godly, so divine. This is lovely. Um, then I got called into ministry, and as a woman, I had to like figure out how does that work in Missouri Synod Lutheran. And as I was going through that and reading the scripture and learning about the past, it allowed me to open up and go, oh shoot, I'm queer too. Like, I'm bisexual. Like,
Yeah.
that's a thing. And so when we think about our theology, like, I had a theology that did not allow me
Hmm.
to be who God created me to be until I was well into my 20s.
Yeah.
And that is a sin. That is idolatry.
Hmm.
Someone put God's image, something else above God's image, because I was not able to hold that image that God had given me. So that's kind of the development of like just engaging with people and going, huh, that's not what the church has told me, or that's not what that person said that you're going to be like. which is also the major benefit of social media.
Mm-hmm.
I've been following people who are living in Gaza, who are in Ukraine, who are telling their stories. And so I'm able to hear about their day, watch the news and go, huh, something got lost in translation
Yeah.
because that's not happening, or they're not reporting on this thing, or what's going on. And so to engage with people who the media or the people around me are trying to tell me their narrative, social media cuts through it,
Mm.
which is, this is my cynical. I think this is why they're trying to get rid of TikTok, because we are actively talking directly to each other, and the powers that be are like, oh shoot, they're going to find out
Mm.
all the secrets that we've been trying to keep from them. Like, they're going to talk directly to someone who's quadriplegic and learn that our system is
Yeah.
not, created to them. They're going to talk to someone who's been a veteran and been at war and find out that war is not great. Like,
Yeah.
all those things. So to be able to go to the source, hear someone's perspective, and if you're on social media and they're talking, it's a place you can ask those questions.
Yeah.
You can ask really tough questions that I would never ask, my friends that are veterans. Maybe we would get to it, but like, these
Yeah.
people are out there saying, ask me the tough questions.
Yeah.
I want you to know these answers, or I
Yeah.
want you to know how I've experienced this. So engaging with the people who you think is other, who
Yeah.
is think that the thems, go and hang out with the thems.
So first of all, I love that we just got mildly conspiracy theorists.
I know. If
Uh,
this podcast doesn't like shoot up, if it gets deleted,
yeah.
we know exactly why.
Yes. Yes. That's yes. That's funny. Uh, the other, I love you telling your own personal story and sort of where you came from and how you discovered significant aspects of yourself only when you started interacting with people sort of in new people in new ways, right? And part of the reason between is so important to me, why it's such a big passion project of mine, is because I want to help people do that. I don't want to convince people of anything. I really don't. I just want to empower people to have more conversations with more people, because I know every time I've done that in my life, I've found God there. I found a new version of myself there, and I've understood the world uh, like so much more deeply. I think about even my own, so as you were telling your story, I think about, I grew up in this tiny little town. Uh, faith wasn't, I've told my faith story in other places before, but it wasn't that big of a deal for me. But it was this tiny little town of all the normal Midwestern, trappings and problems of lack of diversity, or plenty of diversity, but that diversity was lived on literally the other side of the tracks. I knew no out queer people at all growing up. I'm sure I did, but I didn't know that they were. And that
Yeah.
wasn't a thing we talked about. And then I go to college and my RA is gay and fun and in my face and teaching me through experiences where I'm like, what the heck is like my mind is blown by just one person. I often think my world was expanded 1,000-fold by one person within 1 week of college, right? And then I had the rest of my college experience, which is why I think I've spent so much of my career so passionate about the college experience, because it took me out of my small town. And metaphorically, at least, I think there are a lot of people living in small towns who, if they go to college or if they have that experience that lets them talk to just a handful more people from a handful of different lived experiences, the world grows, man. The world
Yeah.
grows and God grows. Like that was my experience. Or as I reflect back on it, I think that's the meaning that I attribute to my experience. God, my understanding of all of humanity grew so dramatically, and therefore all of God grew so dramatically. And anyway, I just wanted to
And I
uplift you
think
telling a story.
there's a fear of, messing it up or getting a bad response from
Mhm.
someone, if you're
Mhm.
trying to engage. I have found that most queer people are very understanding, like
Yeah.
messing up their pronouns, not getting, they're like, yep, okay, you're working on it, you caught it, what,
Yeah.
like they're very understanding because they know that so much of the world has programmed people against them.
Yeah.
So they are extra flexible around what they can hold as discomfort.
Yeah.
So if someone's feeling like, I don't even know like what I would say or how I would do. That's where social media, you can learn a couple of things.
Yeah.
Like so that you feel okay, I could talk to this person and not like step on toes or things.
Yeah.
But also don't be afraid of that. If you
Mhm.
get a bad response and someone they're hurt, they're still in their like healing phase of it, that's not what you're going to get from most people.
Yeah.
Um and to give it a shot, and even
Mm.
not just people, but like ideas, like learn about fentanyl.
Mm.
Where did that start? Where did it
Yeah.
come from? If there's something that you're scared of, you're not sure of, you're really like, oh, I've really only learned what I know from other people. Like, take a weekend and just do a rabbit hole search online and just go down that rabbit hole. Watch the documentaries, learn about what's
Yeah.
happening. Because we did a Bible study last week about where the drug epidemic began. And it actually was a timeline and it lined up around like Jim Crow
Mhm.
laws. And we were like, what? Why is that? And so we asked those, why, what,
Mhm.
and went Googling and like, I had a whole nother Bible study planned, but we all just like
Mhm.
went down the rabbit hole together, Googling, what is this? What's going on? I don't understand. How is this connected? Why is this connected? Is it connected? That curiosity is the bravest thing that
Yeah.
anybody can do. And I think it is holy. It
Mhm.
is the best spiritual practice of just being curious.
Yes. So, when we're done recording this episode, are you immediately going to go film a new TikTok? But here's my real question: what are you excited about right now? Like, what are the themes that are driving you? What's energizing you? What are you creating around right now? I'm guessing there's stuff that is just sort of keeps knocking at your brain and your heart a little bit and makes you want to sing it.
Yeah, I would say like generally I've had a lot more churches reach out and want to do allied development this
Hmm.
year.
Yeah.
So and like meeting them where they are. Some of them it's just like this is what this word means. Others of it's like here's the microaggressions that are keeping people away from your church. Like there's lots of different levels that churches are at.
Yeah.
So but I'm so excited that they're willing to at least bring me in and let's talk about this a little bit.
Yeah.
For the ministry, I'm mostly excited that like we are rolling in a very intentional way now. Before it was like my hobby. The last year I've kind of been like, what is this thing? How do I make this official now that someone's paying me to do this?
Mm.
And so this year it's like, okay, I've got a leadership team starting. I've got, other seminarians and other pastors who are like, okay, let's see what we can do. We're looking at grief groups, we're looking at mission projects, we're, these things that naturally come up in churches. So the fact that I have shed enough trauma of working in big churches with lots of people around me that I want to work with people again.
Mhm.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I know I will share my ministry now. I'm like, I did not think that was going to happen that smoothly. I really liked having all the say and all the go, but now I'm like, no, I think I need more people. I think I want more
Yeah.
people.
So if people want to find you, RevBethany is the handle to look for, right?
Yes,
But
RevBethany. Some of them have Rev.Bethany. I can never remember which ones are, but
yeah,
if you search RevBethany, I've got enough of a following on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram that I'm probably one of the first ones that come up. Um, Our Tapestry online
mhm,
is where the ministry is meeting, where you can sign up for newsletters and see what our current Bible study topic is, or our current mission project. And rev-bethany.com is the stuff about me. What am I doing? What podcast am I on this week? Have I written any chapters of the book that I said I was going to do? that's,
yeah,
that's just me.
yeah. Uh, I can't thank you enough for this conversation. This was fantastic, and I felt like we actually went on a few tangents that took us in places that I didn't expect, and
Yeah.
uh, this this to me is just a good example of I think all we're trying to do here. Like, let's have a real conversation. You and I have met for coffee one time. We happen to live in the same city, and
Yeah.
we've known of each other, but we met for coffee one time. And I love that you and I can have, I mean, just a real conversation about, I mean, some heavy issues. Uh, and that just felt real. It just felt pure. And I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for you agreeing to jump on with us.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me. This is great. I have been poking around, learning about your community too, and I think this is exactly what we need to be doing. Whatever that spirit is calling us in our heart, like if we can all just jump at it, we're going to be doing some pretty great things. So thank you for jumping at your passion.
Thanks, Bethany. Hey, thanks to all you betweeners out there for listening to this episode of the Between Podcast. Make sure you visit between.church on the internet to sign up for our mailing list. That's probably the most important thing, our email list. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. You can check out our 5-minute sermons, 5-ish minute sermons that we post every week. Follow us on social media. We got daily prayers. We got all sorts of other content. And join our community fully. We invite everyone. You are welcome here, no matter who you are or where you're from, no matter what you believe or even if you believe, no matter who you love or how you love, no matter what anybody else has ever told you about you. You are welcome and loved and celebrated here at Between. You know, my favorite church is the space between people. Now go with God's love and create the church between.